European SharePoint Conference, how many that you've attended so far?
This is the third time I've attended in person.
So how does the European SharePoint Conference fit in with all of the events? So you have the SharePoint Conference North America, and of course Ignite being another big one, and this one being the biggest IT Pro Dev conference in Europe.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that through the cloud, we're able to release new technology all the time. So there's a greater and greater appetite for not only to get caught up on that, but for the community to get together. So we've got our big moments twice a year, or in the spring with the SharePoint conference in the US, and in the fall with Ignite. And then we bring the best of Ignite, if you will, for the SharePoint community to ESPC. And it is really, I think after those two events, it's the biggest SharePoint community event all year long in the world, but certainly the biggest in Europe.
And on the question of community, because you and I have had this conversation a lot about this, like, over the last decade, seeing it continue to grow, kind of, like how does Microsoft look at that, and how does it compare to the other communities within Microsoft?
We've been fortunate since the very beginning, even before we released the first version of SharePoint, that there was this vibe around it, and I think it's because people want to build lots and lots of solutions around SharePoint, whether they just standing up new sites or if they're writing a lot of code to customize the web UI or extend it with workflow solutions. And so the fact that it's this product that organizations adopt, they build many solutions on top of it, sort of attracts the flywheel of the community. And then we've been incredibly fortunate with community leaders like you and dozens of MVPs who sort of sustained it and hosted SharePoint Saturdays around the world and made events like the European SharePoint Conference a big success, that it became fun. It became more than just essential to keep up to date and talk about how to build these apps, and more of a family or a community, if you will. And it's really fun to come to ESPC every year and see that community in Europe come together in one place.
So at the beginning of the year, you made this claim that this year, 2018, would be the biggest year in SharePoint history. And that's coming on the back of two very big years. So what has been like the main announcements of this year? What's made it so big?
When I said that, I meant sort of both in terms of the adoption and the product news, because I saw the hockey stick of adoption, the sort of S-curve, if you will, coming in the cloud. We announced in our last earnings update over 150 million monthly active users for Office 365, with SharePoint being by far the second biggest used component after email and Exchange. And so we see just more and more small businesses coming to the cloud than ever would install on-premises servers. And we sort of saw about 2 years ago the security concerns of the cloud not go away, but a lot of companies realized they had better security and governance and control and insights in the cloud than running their own servers. And so we see a huge number of big customers, including some that are speaking at ESPC with us, like Shell and Lego and so forth, going to the cloud. So one aspect of it was just seeing this incredible hockey stick in adoption. And then we had a big pipeline of news coming, not only with SharePoint, with all the things we had coming with OneDrive, with files on demand, and the access to SharePoint sites, and bringing AI and more real-time collaboration with the Office apps with OneDrive, team sites, adding more and more capability to SharePoint team sites, but also more connections to things like Power Apps and Flow, and of course Microsoft Teams. One of the big announcements we did at Ignite was how SharePoint pages and features can start to show up inside the Teams experiences tabs, and how the SharePoint framework, our customization model, is going to be the way you can build these customized pages inside Teams. And so that people are really excited about. And then the hardcore intranet experience. In the past, SharePoint was really just a web content management system for those kinds of intranet sites. People had to build a lot of the experience out of the box. And more, I'm sorry, not out of the box, but sort of in their custom code. More and more of the experience now we deliver is out of the box. And when people have seen the communication site, user experience, and the layouts and the web parts we offer, it's really a big leap beyond what we've ever done in SharePoint, both on the web and mobile. And so that's across OneDrive, team sites, and these sort of portal intranet sites. We had a lot of news, and Ignite was very gratifying to get that out at Ignite and then come to ESPC and talk about it in a lot more detail.
It's interesting, there's just a community survey, I don't know if you saw it, about SharePoint Saturdays. So it just published the information today, so you've not seen it yet. But one of the things around the SharePoint Saturdays was trying to get a sense of what are people who are attendees, and the vast majority of, it was like 54% of the people that responded had attended a SharePoint Saturday in the last 30 days.
That's terrific.
And we asked them, like, what topics are you interested in? Number one topic is the modern sites and all the topics around that. Number two is teams, just behind that. But it's very much, and then in the top five, I think number 5 is end user adoption and engagement. So all right around that, people want to see those modern experiences. So what are you going to be talking about around that, like this week and in your keynote?
Yeah, it's interesting to sort of riff on the SharePoint Saturdays a bit, that when the bulk of the attendees for that were still using on-premises SharePoint, it was a little tricky because say you had, at that point in the evolution, maybe 20% of our customers in the cloud using SharePoint Online, and maybe 40% at 2013 and 40% in 2010. What do you talk about there that sort of a broad appeal? And so there was a lot. I'd looked 2-3 years ago, and the sessions were, using InfoPath or something like that, and we're talking about customization approaches that were, 8 years old. And so now that we've got not everybody, and it will probably never be everybody, but the bulk of the market planning to or in the cloud, it means those sessions can embrace the latest technologies from us because they get the new communication sites, the new OneDrive capabilities and Teams. And so it's caused a resurgence in interest in things like SharePoint Saturdays because it used to be you only would get up to date every 3 to 5 years when you were deploying a new release. Now if you subscribe to Office 365, you're getting new capabilities every month, so you feel like, oh my gosh, it's been a year since I've been to an event, I better go to an event and learn all the latest things. And so that's, I think, why we see more and more new SharePoint Saturdays and why we see ESPC this week getting record attendance, is the amount of new things that even in the last 3 to 6 months. So that in terms of communication sites, we'd go around the world and we'd go visit all these customers who built all these SharePoint intranets. It was very gratifying. And then you'd look at it and we'd hear how much work it was. And we said, wow, gosh, we could just do, not all of that, because people do want to integrate with different apps and customize a certain way. We could make it a lot more out of box. And so I guess it was about 3.5 years ago when I came back to the team, we really ramped up under a guy named Ken Fry, who's our design leader, a much bigger design team, and we said, let's really push the envelope about the out-of-the-box experience in SharePoint. And let's do it on a new client-side rendered framework that we now call the SharePoint framework. And so that was the sort of dual investment. One is out-of-box UI, and second is a new modern web stack that became communication sites. And as people see what they can do, I hate to say it, and I probably shouldn't, people look at it and say, that's not SharePoint. And I said, no, we have a new UI for SharePoint. We built it over the last 3 years. Come take a look. And one of the things that we showed at Ignite, but also announced and are giving out hard copies of at this event, is what we call the SharePoint Lookbook, which is a couple of dozen pages of the new UI you can build, new kinds of sites you can build with SharePoint. And it's really stunning. If there's one thing that anybody who's ever been associated with SharePoint should look at that we've done is this lookbook. You can search on the web on SharePoint Lookbook and you can see the kinds of experiences we're going into depth at ESPC about how you can use. And then you can still, if you've got a custom manufacturing solution that you need to integrate in a SharePoint UI as a web part or something like that, you really want fine-grained control of a footer, if you really want to write that code, we have the SharePoint framework, which we came out with alongside with communication sites. And that is easily, and this is sort of mind-blowing because we have Outlook and Excel. SharePoint framework in just the last 18 months since it shipped is the #1 extensibility mechanism in Office 365, which is sort of stunning. It usually takes years for these things. And so that tells us we've sort of hit the mark of an experience in SharePoint that's much more out of box, but when people need to extend it, they have a modern JavaScript framework to go do that. And there's some great sessions this week at ESPC about both the end user side and the developer side of SharePoint.
Now I know a year ago, even earlier this year, 6 months ago, there was still a lot of conversation around moving people from classic to the modern experiences. The language around that has decreased a lot, and I don't know if it's just I'm not hearing it, or if you're also seeing that that companies are making that transition now, or they've got a plan for that transition.
Yeah.
And where are we in that move?
Yeah. Well, it was May the 4th, Star Wars Day 2016, when we announced the new SharePoint UI and developer platform, and we knew that when you do something like that, you cannot replace all the functionality of a product that's been around for more than a decade in a single release. And so we knew it would be a journey, but we didn't want to wait until the last feature was done in the new experience and the new web stack that we use. And so we got it out there, and we were very straightforward about it, and celebrated having this new experience as well as the classic mode. And then we just spent over the last 2.5 years sort of ticking off the things that people want to see in that modern experience. And we had both feedback and also, more importantly, telemetry from the service, because we were able to see which features users were clicking on and that we didn't have yet in the modern UI, and we've been knocking those off. And not to say we're 100% done, but the number of things that are left is relatively used by a very important but relatively small set of people, and so that's why you hear the bulk of the market moving to the modern experience, and we'll be promoting that much more actively. I think the thing that will take a while is not the team sites, because the team sites really should just all move now, with only a few exceptions, is people have built these publishing sites, and where the development platform, being server-side ASP.NET, is very different. And so it's not like those will just magically become new communication sites. So what we see is companies adding more and more communication sites, and when's natural for them to do their big portal relaunch, doing what we did inside Microsoft, is that we're relaunching on the new communications sites UI and the new SharePoint framework, and then sort of the classic publishing sort of winds down. But so I think most of the work we've got to do is there, both the features that people want in terms of page metadata and approval and some layout options that we didn't have 2 years ago when we introduced the communication sites experience, and then just also being patient and helpful with customers for when they do move, do make their next gen intranet. But it's so much better. The user experience is so much better for both end users and people editing the site. The performance is dramatically better. It's rendered client side, and the leveraging of CDNs. It's sort of, if you were going to stand up a modern consumer service on the internet, it's how you'd architect it. And then also the developer platform, that companies want to go hire web developers who have mainstream industry skills, and we were quite proud of the community we built around SharePoint, but it was a little bit of a .NET island, if you will, in SharePoint development from what was going on in the rest of the web industry. And so the fact that we're leveraging standards like React and Yeoman and so forth that most web developers just know, means it's a lot easier to get a SharePoint developer productive than it was 5 to 7 years ago. So all those reasons are why we think people should move, but the publishing sites will take a little more time. But everybody should, I think almost everybody is flipped on the OneDrive for Business UI, just a handful left. The majority of team sites are on the modern UI, and you'll see us push, but not insist, but push pretty aggressively, because I think the biggest problem we have is awareness, not capability on the team sites going modern.
So kind of the part B to that question is around on-prem and kind of the path for that. And this came up, at the Digital Workplace Conference in Australia in August, as well as SharePoint Fest in August in Seattle, where people there's still that remnant, because there's a huge, number of percentage-wise, it's over half that have some semblance of a hybrid environment, whether it's true hybrid or it's just technically hybrid but not, integrated hybrid. So it's like, what is the state of on-prem and support for on-prem?
We want to be clear and transparent and lead with the cloud, both in terms of functionality and security. Functionality should hopefully be pretty clear at this point. There's just a lot of capabilities, the Microsoft Graph, Office 365 groups, Teams, Yammer, Stream, Planner, Power Apps, Flow, kind of on and on, that you only get in the cloud. Now you can have SharePoint 2013 level functionality on-prem, but the modern SharePoint experience is really integrating all those cloud services. And so you just get a lot more capability. But that's usually not the controversy we have to address when we're talking about should you go to the cloud or not. Usually people have the perception that they can't because of security reasons. In some cases, regulatory reasons. And we just have to walk through that, the operational security we do of our data center, how we run the service with nobody having privileges to see customer data, the number of certifications and audits and pen tests we do, the amount of insights and controls and governance you get on your data in the cloud, DLP, e-discovery, auditing, and so forth, that when people are able to sit down with us and have a logical discussion, they'd say, you're right. The cloud doesn't just have more end user functionality. It delivers more security and governance. And so, but sometimes we get to people saying, I'm not able to convince the people in my organization that's true, and to which we'd say, come to an event like ESPC and get armed, so we'll help you make the case. And you may say, that worked or that didn't work. And when that doesn't work and people aren't ready, and it is obviously the customer's choice, not our choice, when they're not ready or there's a regulatory rule, we still have the server release. And we unabashedly will lead with the cloud and Office 365. But also, I'm incredibly proud that SharePoint Server 2019 that we just released a few weeks ago is the best release of SharePoint Server on premises we've ever done. It includes the new OneDrive sync capability, it includes the new Team Sites UI, it includes some level of communication site functionality, it includes all the hybrid options you discussed. So we have a great release that's better than 2016, 2013, 2010. And so if you can't go to the cloud, go to SharePoint Server 2019. But just realize groups, Graph, Teams, Yammer, Stream, Flow, Power Planner, etc., that you're going to be missing out on a lot of functionality. And so I think I'm able to balance those two things, both that we've got the best release of SharePoint on-prem we've ever done, but most customers should run, not walk to the cloud.
And so last question for you. So anything else from your keynote this week? Anything else that you talk about and focus on in that you've not touched on already?
Yeah, no, I think we've hit the big points, except for one, AI. Because AI is a space that is evolving incredibly fast. We see that in not just in technology, but almost every industry is being transformed by AI because the algorithms are getting better and better. And the fact that you have in a product, whether it's a software product like SharePoint or a car or a store, this continuous feedback loop that can get better and better from machine learning and optimize itself for the customer experience is just an obvious thing to take advantage of. And so by being in the Microsoft cloud, we can securely and with privacy help organizations use AI technologies to not only make the user experience better, but also bring AI to help automate business processes. So the last of the 4 sections of the keynote was around how AI was helping the end user. We showed some things with Microsoft Search, a brand we introduced at Ignite that uses AI to make the search experience better. We also talked about how Azure Cognitive Services can help you reason over data in SharePoint, say to do sentiment analysis on content, to do image recognition, and those Azure AI services combined with Microsoft Flow for orchestration on data and in the experience of SharePoint. That's sort of magic in how you can transform these business processes, where some things that would have taken a human, you can either automate the logic and flow or use AI for inferencing to take a guess at it. Maybe you'll need the human being at the last stage to sort of jump in and say whether the image recognition is right or not. People have been using it for things like medical diagnostics, where they compare, a healthy lung versus an unhealthy lung and see if, what the initial assessment from the system is. Obviously, you still want a doctor involved in things like that. So AI is the big area, and one that I think you'll see more and more of as we head into 2019. So a good reason to attend ESPC 2019 as well.
Is there any other?
Could you just move a little bit through that?
Yeah.
Yes. Could you give one more introduction to the conference, to the whole setup here for people that are maybe not familiar with the conference?
Sure.
Just sell it.
Great. Hey, Jeff Teper from Microsoft. I am so glad to be here at the biggest European SharePoint conference in history, with the biggest contingent of people from the Microsoft product development teams we've ever sent to ESPC in history. There are an incredible number of sessions on a wide variety of topics, not just SharePoint, but increasingly the Microsoft Cloud technologies that connect to SharePoint, Power Apps and Flow, Team, Azure, and just much more. And so besides being a great place to learn about all the latest technologies that have come out, ESPC is an amazing place to network with the community. The SharePoint community is, and I've said this many times, the best community in technology. It's helpful, it's supportive, it can give you advice and feedback to grow your career. And ESPC is an amazing place not only to attend sessions and learn about technologies, but meet with people and brainstorm and just learn and grow. And so I think it's an amazing event for that, and I am so excited to be back at ESPC again this year.
Do you know anything about the venue or the location, or any words on that?
This is an amazing venue here in Copenhagen, the very modern architectural building. You sort of look at it and you wonder whether it'll tip over or not, but I think the sort of modernism connects a little bit to what we're trying to do in Office 365 and SharePoint, is create an amazing, engaging, modern experience for people. The conference venue is here very bright and airy, lots of natural light, and great place for literally the couple thousand people who are here to go to different sessions and meet without it feeling closed in like some conference facilities are. So I think the ESPC team has done an amazing job yet again picking a very interesting venue for the community to get together. We couldn't be more happy to be here.
Perfect. Last question.
Yeah.
Do we know anything about I know this video is going to sell the next conference. Do we know anything about that?
I don't.
No? Okay.
Yeah.
Then that's it.
I don't either.
No?
We'll know in a couple days.
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well done.
Hey, thanks a lot, Jeff.
Sure.